and this is Lori Smith on Spreaker. Glad to be here. I'm doing a show, Why I Speak Out Against Child Abuse, and that was Fallen Angel by The Deliverance. And I like their songs. I like their music. I'm glad to be here, and I choose to speak out against child abuse because I have a voice, and I have the ability and the capability to do it. Not everybody would want to do this. It's not easy. I mean, it's hard to find people that are even interested in listening to what you have to say, even as a survivor. I have a lot of support actually on Facebook. I've got a lot of Facebook friends who support my work. A lot of people locally where I live, and but the world doesn't necessarily hear my stuff. You know what I mean? I've written books and put articles out and been speaking publicly for quite a few years now, since about 2009, and I figured, why not? I have nothing better to do with my time than to speak out about what I know is so incredibly deadly, and that these children out here today who are being abused, their stories may appear in the newspaper. You may hear about them in nobody really reads a paper anymore, but they used to. That was back in the old days. Now it's on the web. It's on the internet. You see it on TV. You might see it on social networking sites, and the issues of child abuse aren't going away. So I figured, hey, neither am I. And the great part about that is that I really don't care. It's not a popularity contest, actually. Speaking out about child abuse actually pushes people away, and and that's the truth. Nobody wants to hear about this stuff. Nobody wants to deal with it. There's a handful of people that are willing to deal with it. And the survivors, we're left dealing with it. But many survivors, can't listen to this type of stuff. And many survivors are still so wounded and so unable to deal with the issues surrounding child abuse because of their own wounding and their own horrific past that, they can't get involved, right? And for me, I figured, well, I've already alienated my so-called family, really, which wasn't really a family in the first place because I grew up in an abusive family, so there you go. And as soon as I started speaking out against child abuse, I got a lot of flack from them, mainly because they knew that I was going to go public with our story, and they weren't happy about it. But I didn't drag them into it, and I didn't necessarily point out their addresses and name names. I kept it all pretty much about my story and a little bit, about the issues that sort of destroyed our family. But the stuff that I wrote about was mainly the abuse that I suffered in the home, and because it had to come from first person. I don't know what they were thinking and feeling at the time, but I know what I was, and it's harsh because it really put a rift in my communications with my so-called abuser family. And I thought, I don't care, they were never there to support me in the first place. We were never there for each other, and so it doesn't matter to me, to lose what? I didn't lose anything by speaking out. I actually gained a whole lot, because I gained a whole lot of respect and dignity from people that I didn't even know, who treated me with more dignity and more respect than anybody in my family had ever done. And that's the truth of it. Growing up abused, people who grow up in abusive homes quite often are not afforded that dignity and that respect, and so I didn't have anything to lose by speaking out. I really had everything to gain. And also it was a sort of a self-protection measure, because I thought, I am not going to my grave with this information. I'm not going to leave this world before spilling the beans on my abusers because they got away with it. My parents went to court and they got hauled into court, and they had to do they were supposed to do mandatory counseling. They didn't do any time. This is back in the 60s when you could go ahead and trash your kids and trash your family. Nobody really cared. But the social workers were involved, and my parents didn't do what they were supposed to do. But that didn't really matter to the courts, and so the abuse just continued on. But now there's more and more, thankfully, in place to, even though it's not a perfect system, we all know that, to try and help children who are being abused. And it's not going to change unless we continue to speak out against this stuff. That's why I speak out against child abuse. It's not going to change unless we keep making noise, and it's uncomfortable noise. Nobody wants to hear about it. I mean, I talked about this night after night after night on my blog talk radio shows, thousands of shows. Well, no, I did 1,000 shows, but the thing is I mean, really, that's a lot of shows. Talking about it and talking about it, and I thought, hopefully somewhere, someday, in some way, my voice would be would make an impact with everybody else's. My voice on my own can't really make an impact. There's a lot of survivors out there who have been able to get the laws changed, and who've been able to use their voices and use their the conviction of their abusers to make a lot of noise in the press, and that's awesome. Like, I can't do that because my abusers are dead, and my dad is like 90-something years old, and it's just like, oh my God, I'm never going to see justice. Like, I'm never going to see justice for what happened to me. But the justice that I kind of get is just the fact that they couldn't shut me up. Nobody can, it's like they couldn't do it. Like, they couldn't kill me. They couldn't shut me up. Survivors of abuse, so many times, like these kids out here growing up right now, will have to deal with this in another, 15 years or 20 years, depending on how old they are right now. And it's the issue that, so many times the abusers have so much support. Abusers have a lot of support, generally, from society and from people that they know. Like, my parents had a lot of support. They were looked upon, not necessarily as great people by society, but the neighbors all really sort of, I don't know. I don't even know what you want to call it. Befriended, I guess. The neighbors just totally befriended my parents and really didn't care about the abuse that was going on in the home. They sort of figured that, well, we must be bad kids and we probably deserved what we got. And I heard that all my life, that I was a bad kid and that I deserved to be beaten on and kicked around. But the thing, and my family would agree, actually, if they were sitting here, they would agree. They would agree that I did deserve what I got. But see, no child deserves to be abused in any way. See, that's where their thinking is wrong, and that's where society's thinking is wrong. See, there's a difference between right and wrong. And, what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. Child abuse is wrong. Let's all remember that. Child abuse is a crime. And the issue is that, yeah, people, neighbors, there was neighbors that actually knew because they saw the beatings that were, especially for myself, that were inflicted on me. Also on my oldest sister, who was 18 years older than me, by the way. And my oldest sister was abused mainly by my dad. He was he's just such a monster. But anyway, neighbors saw what he did to her. Neighbors saw what he did to my mom. Neighbors saw what he did to my brothers, and they got away with it. They did. They literally got away with it. They didn't do any time. Oh, they had to go to court. Big whoop-de-doo. They got to keep us in the home, and they got to keep kicking our ass. And and that's the truth of it. That's the reality of it. Nobody really cares about these kids, and then until they end up dead in the morgue, and then you see their, like on the web, you see the articles come across, of some child 2 years old being beaten to death, or a 2-month-old baby being raped and beaten and dying of their because of the injuries, and then everybody's crying the blues. Oh, poor little baby. But nobody cared enough to get that child some help. And people don't realize that this stuff is going on. They really don't. It's like, it's just, that's why I tell my story, because it's so horrific. Like that anybody would think that this stuff doesn't go on. That's why I speak out, because there are a whole segment of society, there is a whole segment of society out there who says that this stuff is just not reality, that because they can't believe in their own mind that somebody could do this to children, right? And the sad thing is that they do. I posted a whole lot of stuff on Facebook this last week, really, dealing with photographs and the truth behind photographs. You see these little kids in these headlines. I do, because I have quite a few advocates on my friends lists on my social networking sites. And, they're always passing and sharing. We always do share information regarding child abuse. And you see these pictures come up of these these poor little kids, and they're smiling. Usually they're smiling in the photo, because generally people don't take pictures of their children while they're abusing them. They don't normally do that. Sometimes you see it, or and you're like, what? But so most of the time they don't. And so you see these pictures of these happy little kids, and your mind, you can't even conceive that somebody could do that to these poor children. So then everybody's heart's breaking, and it's like, yeah, the truth behind the photographs, And so I posted a couple of posts on Facebook about that, because I have very few pictures of myself as a child except for school photos. And because my mom would actually pitch out the money for the school photos, which was very good of her. And but we weren't taking pictures as a family very often, because we weren't really a family. It was very much just a war zone in my house. And so the only person who had a camera that was ever taking any pictures was my sister, who was 5 years older than me. And generally when she was taking pictures, we were all doing something that was good, which was something normal that a family would be doing, like somebody visiting, somebody from out of town, or a birthday, or something like that. I mean, it wasn't like she took tons of pictures, but she did take a few, and otherwise there wouldn't be any of me, because my parents didn't take pictures of their children. Back in those days, it wasn't all that important. Nowadays you see people taking mega pictures of their children, but back in the 60s and 50s and stuff, I mean, parents didn't necessarily do that sort of thing. And especially mine, because they grew up in 1920s Nova Scotia, and they were abused. They grew up on farms, and they were ignorant as all get out, and they didn't know anything about modern technology or cameras, and so they didn't even know how to operate a camera, so they wouldn't have taken pictures of us anyway. So there you go. So there's very few pictures of me, but the ones that are there, I actually did put a couple of posts out on Facebook about the reality behind those pictures, because people would look at those pictures. I've had people tell me, "Oh, look, what a nice family." And I sit there and I laugh, because I'm like, okay, no, the truth behind that picture is that it's not the reality. That's not real to me. I mean, for a few moments we all smiled for the camera, and then we all just went back to our normal lifestyle of being assaulted in every way, verbally, mentally, psychologically, emotionally, sexually, physically. It was just absolutely horrific. And even family members get involved in that crap, because I have family members that sit around and, well, they used to, I don't talk to them anymore, but back when we used to chat, in the old days there, before I blew them all off, who would sit there and say, well, Mom just makes such good cookies. And my mom was a good baker, no doubt, but I'm not talking about baking cookies. I'm talking about abuse. If I wanted to talk about baking cookies, I would have set up a baking cookie blog, I'm talking about abuse. And yeah, so my mom made cookies. She used to pass the cookies out to the neighbor kids. We didn't have a whole lot of money. We were actually dirt poor. But my mom always spent, literally hundreds of dollars. And this was a long time ago, when food was much, much cheaper than it is today. She would spend a lot of money on food. And we weren't starving, and we were never starved. We had to eat what we were served, so we weren't allowed to turn food away, but whatever she was cooking was it. But the thing is we didn't starve, and we weren't withheld food. But my mom loved to eat, and she weighed about 300 pounds, and she loved to bake and cook, and it was kind of her thing. And she would pass cookies out to the kids in the neighborhood, and of course all these kids just loved my mom. And they would just be like, "Oh, your mom is so nice. She gives us cookies." And I'm like, "Yeah, but as soon as I go back in the house there tonight, I'm liable to get an ass kicking, for no reason." People say, "Well, why would your mom beat on you all the time like that?" And absolutely, it was for no reason. It was generally for something stupid, like leaving a toy out, or a look on my face. Quite often it was a look on my face, but actually I was living in fear, because my dad was insane and was threatening to kill us at night. And I had been sexually abused by my brother at the age of 8, raped and sodomized and tied up, assaulted. And so I was not developed properly as a child, and so I had a lot of problems, and I had a lot of emotional, sort of psychological issues going on as a young person, and I wasn't necessarily the happiest kid to be around, I suppose. And so my mom would just take advantage of the fact that I was afraid of her also, because she was my main abuser, beating me all the time. And she would take advantage of that. And she would use that to be able to say, get that look off your face. And of course, then I'd be like, oh shit, I'm going to get beat. And so then the look would get worse, and then she would beat me. And this was her reasoning for it. This was her excuse, was that I was just this bad kid, this horrible kid. And the reality is that I was a good kid. And the damage done, it's done. I can't ever take that. I can't ever get rid of it. It's just there. We'll never. I don't see how a person could ever get over that. It formed my personality, right? And so it's taken me a lot of work to get where I am today. Where and I still have issues. I mean, who doesn't? I mean, everybody has some issues in their life. But the thing is I'm coming from behind the 8 ball. So it's a whole lot of psychological, emotional damage of my view of myself, right? So it's a lot of work to try to change that. But I thought, I have nothing better to do to speak out about this stuff, because these little kids, they're smiling in these pictures, and 2 months later they're dead. That's what's happening to children out here. And if they don't die, they're in the hospital due to the abuse. And if they don't get into the hospital because of the abuse, then they're just lying in their crib, or they're lying on the floor in their bedroom, or somewhere in the house, or wherever they are, where these whoever these people are that are abusing them, and they're not going to get any help. And then they're going to have to grow up and deal with this garbage for the rest of their life. Many people think of the amount of children that are murdered. It's absolutely pathetic. And I think about these little kids, like thousands per year are murdered. I don't know the latest stats, but I mean, years ago it was so many thousands per year die due to abuse. That is just the tiniest little tip of the iceberg of what's going on with children, and people know it. And people want to call it discipline. They want to call it parental rights. My mom used to say, I have the right, I can treat you however I want to. I'd be like, well, after my mom would beat the shit out of me, I'd have bruises and scratches on my face and stuff. And she'd be like, I'd be like, I have to go to school. What am I going to tell my teacher? She'd be like, I don't care. Just tell your teacher I hit you, and I'm going to hit you again if you keep up your attitude. My mom did not care. And the reason my mom didn't care was because she didn't care if she lost me. See, it meant nothing to her. That's what these little kids that are dying, and these little kids that are being killed and murdered, little babies and little kids, little toddlers, and then preschoolers, and then school age kids that are dying and being murdered by these people, whoever they are, whether it's their caregivers or parents or whoever they happen to be. They are not wanted, and so they're considered expendable. See, otherwise, who would murder a child? There has to be something completely psychologically wrong with somebody who would do that. People say, oh, they must have just had a bad day, or, they must have just lost it, It's like, yeah, no, they probably never had it, Like, I mean, my mom used to say stuff like, I can kill you if I want to, after she'd be beating on me and be laying on the floor in a pool of my own blood. And, she'd be like, I can kill you if I want to. That's my right. I brought you, my mom loved to say this, I brought you into the world, I can take you out. See, now that's a joke today on Facebook, but when I see that, I get pissed off, because my mom used to tell me that during beatings and stuff, that she had the right to take my life. And it's absolutely pathetic. And what's even more pathetic is, the reason I talk about my story so much is because I'm just so pissed off about it, because, I tried to protect my mom. I mean, I put myself on the line against my dad as a young kid, to protect my mom from my dad. And, that's the thanks I get. It's like, thanks, Mom. It just pisses me off. And there's no way that I can ever, that she would even ever make it up. Like, she even on her deathbed, she never even made it up. She just said on her deathbed, oh, I was a terrible mother. That's what she said. No apology, no, I'm sorry I hurt you. She knew she hurt me. She knew what she did, right? And, I tried to protect this woman, and the sad thing is it wasn't appreciated. I just got my butt kicked some more, and it's like, why did I do that? I mean, I sit around and shake my head, because I'm like, why did I do that? Take beatings from my dad for sticking up for my mom. It's like, I mean, literally, I mean, I at 9 years old, took a bat to my dad's head for my mother and ended up suffering for it big time. So, he shook me like a rag doll, and literally, I mean, that's shaken baby syndrome, but I was a 9-year-old kid, and threw me across the room and to a wall. And, this is the sort of thing that people don't know what's going on behind those photographs. Oh, you've got such a nice looking family. Isn't that great? It's like, right, but see, they don't know, right? So that's why I put these articles out on Facebook, the truth behind photographs, because I want people to know these little pictures of these little kids out here smiling, and everybody thinks, oh, isn't that so cute, and a poor little kid. And it's like, yeah, the abusers must have had some serious support to be able to get away with what they were doing, because obviously nobody was looking in on the welfare of those children. And it's generally not that a child is just not being abused and being loved and looked after, and then all of a sudden one day somebody accidentally makes a mistake and kills the child. No, abuse is abuse, man, and it's rampant. It's rampant, and it's absolutely horrific. And I thought, I have nothing better to do with my time. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. That's the whole thing. I have no idea. So none of us do, right? There's no guarantee. So the thing is while I'm here, I thought, hey, if I've got 5 years, 2 years, 2 months, or 1 day, I'm going to just make as much noise as I can about child abuse, because this is wrong. This is absolutely pathetic and wrong that this should be going on. And children, it's just going to continue going on. We're going to lose more and more children. And the ones that don't die are going to have to deal for the rest of their lives with the pain and the trauma and PTSD and whatever else they might have. Because of the abuse, and to me that's a life sentence. See, but the abusers generally walk free, right? Mine did, and that's sad. To me, like that's completely wrong and pathetic. That society really does take side with the abusers and the victims, the survivors. I mean, I like to say I'm a survivor, not a victim, but I was a victim, but I'm a survivor now. And the thing is, I mean, these children, I mean, they are the victims in this case, and yet society says they get a life sentence. They get a life sentence. They either die or they get a life sentence of having to deal with the aftermath of abuse, and it's like, that's why I put myself out here publicly, so that people can see how hard it is, and that it's not an easy road. It's not, and I know so many survivors. It's not easier for them. It hasn't been easy for anybody that I've ever met that's a survivor of abuse. And so we got to stop it. Like, education really is the key. And education is everything in this. So, in your own way, whatever you can do, become educated, especially if you have children. Find out, what to look for, signs. Watch out for your kids if you have children. Look out for your children's friends. I had a little weekend week of sitting around remembering, some things were very important to me when I was a young teen, and a family that I talk about all the time, quite often actually, stepped in sort of and helped me out, and I actually wrote about them in Life of Death Redemption. It was my friend and her parents. And her parents were, I mean, at the time, they said stuff to me that I it was nice, and it was great to be treated with for the first time in my life, with some dignity and respect that I was not getting at home ever. And like a real normal person, they treated me just really decently, and I'll never forget it. I'll never ever forget it. I remember the suppers that they used to serve at their house. They used to set a place for me at their table, and they used to say the nicest things to me. Look out for the kids around you. Pay attention. Look for the signs, and learn how to protect children around you and your own children, and then become involved in your own neighborhood. Like, whatever you can do. I know for myself, like, everybody's busy, nobody's got all that much time, but whatever you do, look out for children around you. That's a big issue, because you may be the only person that a child reaches out to. Or you may be the only person that hears that child screaming before they're killed. You may be the only person that knows that a child is being abused or being left alone or neglected, and it may be up to you to save that child's life. So learn the facts, get the information, and work at this, because it's going to take all of us to change this. It's going to take all of us to make a difference, right? I'm going to play another song, World of Beauty by the Deliverance. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.